Hello, I'm Anthony Brown, and thank you for joining me for this live talk and reading from Reminiscing with Legends, my recently launched book about Hearts' exhilarating journey to Scottish Cup glory in 1998. The book, which I've got in my hand here, was released at the start of November, the 4th of November, so it's been out now officially for around 6 weeks. And I'm pleased to say it's done really well so far in terms of the main thing for me was that it's got positive feedback in terms of the players enjoyed it, supporters who have read it so far have enjoyed it, and it's been a really positive vibe since it came out, and I've just really enjoyed sort of share it. I know this is a bit cliched to talk about journeys and things like that. I wouldn't usually go down that road, but it has felt like a journey, this whole procedure of writing a book and releasing it. And so I just thought, obviously, I did my launch a few weeks back, with which some of you will have watched, with Billy Brown and Keith Downey and Paul Ritchie, and that was really enjoyable. But with the current situation, obviously, there's no chance to get a proper gathering in a venue whereby all the players and supporters and myself can come together and just sort of talk about the book, celebrate everything that's in it, because I think as much as it's my book in the sense that I've written it, I feel like I've written it on behalf of the Hearts support, because I think that's the big thing that's come out of this, that so many people have got in touch just to thank me for writing it, and that means a lot, because it's almost like they appreciate the fact I've gone out and spoken to all these people and brought it all together. And for me, it was just about writing the book for my own personal satisfaction, if nothing else, initially, in terms of something. It's something I always wanted to do, write a book. Many of you will know from reading the book that I was a Hearts supporter as a boy. I was 15 when Hearts won the Cup in 1998, and it was a season that meant a lot to me in terms of how I fell. Well, not how I fell in love with football, because I was already into football by that point, but it was a massive, probably the best season I ever had following Hearts, and it was probably the last season that I really followed them as a supporter before I started to turn towards a career in journalism. So it was a very special year for me. And to have been able to put this book together, was really satisfying, just the process of being able to do it and get it out there. But equally satisfying has been the feedback over the last 6 weeks to 2 months from everybody involved in it. I mean, I was quite anxious at first about, have I done this justice? Have I maybe made any mistakes or anything? I think every author would go through that anxiety of worrying about somebody pulling them up about something, but thankfully we've not had that so far. And all of the responses have just been so gratifying in terms of it's almost taking people back to that period when Hearts had what for me was the best team of my lifetime, and from Hearts supporters of all generations, it was one of the best Hearts teams, certainly since the 1950s. So I thought, obviously, I'm trying to do as much as I can to not only promote the book, but just help people engage with the book. I mean, some people will have read the book and that'll be it for them, and they'll not have another chance. They may decide never to read it again. But I'd like to think that everybody wants to engage with it again. And all the chapters are such that you can revisit them, I think, and still get an element of feel good from it. So I'm hoping that people that will have read the book, because some people I know have read it in 3 or 4 days, which I find amazing considering how long it took me to write, and it's 140,000 words long. So fair play to everybody who's read it that quick, and I'll take that as a compliment that you were in that zone where you could just batter through it in such quick time. But I'm hoping that even the guys who have read it will think, I want to go back and listen to a bit more of it. And because to be honest, again, going back to that point of it being a journey, I do genuinely feel like everybody's been on this journey with me. I'm very sceptical about social media, but I've certainly seen the good side of social media throughout this process in terms of the support and encouragement I've had. It's just been so humbling. Like, it really has. It's been a lonely time in terms of writing it, because I've had to hide myself away in the bedroom and what have you, when my wife and kids have been out and about during the lockdown for their 1 hour daily exercise or whatever. And obviously I wasn't able to help my wife that much during that period because I was just having to focus on the book. So social media was almost my support network at sometimes, because I didn't really have anybody to talk to beyond my own family and close friends, and obviously you weren't able to get out and about much through the months when I was writing the book. So just, it was reassuring when I put a tweet out about the book and so many people were interested in it, and that was just really helped me to keep going in terms of when times were tough and I was thinking, oh God, when's this going to see the light of day? Just all the support, and people genuinely seemed interested. And I know that's an easy thing because the subject matter is so emotive, and it is, like, as it says on the back of the book, it's literally the best day of many people's lives in terms of the Hearts support, the day that Hearts beat Rangers in 1998. So that's helped in terms of engaging with Hearts supporters and potential readers and things like that. So that's made that side of it easy. It's an easy subject to hook people on because, I mean, it's a book about their greatest day. But just the fact people have been interested in it and want to know about it, it's all, there were times, don't get me wrong, where it was all people were asking me and it was a bit of a burden because I felt pressure to get it turned around and get it out in time, also to do a good job of it. And there were times I was thinking, can I just put the release date back a few months and take the pressure off? So that aspect of it was quite tough. But equally, I felt like when I announced that I was writing the book, I felt I had to do that to pin myself to a deadline to make sure that I completed it. Because if I hadn't come out and said, I'm doing this book on Hearts winning the Cup, I would have probably got slack and just it would have been something that would have drifted for a few years. So by coming out onto social media, I'd almost made a promise to you guys that this book's coming and I couldn't sort of not fulfill it, if you like. So everybody's been really positive and I feel like I've had a proper experience writing this book, even though I've not been able to go out and have gatherings and supporters clubs and book signings and things like that, the ordinary things that authors would generally get the chance to do. So that's why I've enjoyed all these. I enjoyed the launch I did a few weeks back with Billy, Paul and Keith Downey a few weeks back, and I thought because it's Scottish Cup final week this week, people are stuck in their house with nothing to do. I thought, what can I do that's book related, that's not repeating what I did a few weeks ago, but giving you a slightly different flavour of the book? I thought, why don't I do a wee reading and a wee sort of talk about the process behind it and a Q&A, because I know that sort of stuff fascinates me. So I'm hoping that there'll be people out there that are interested to know about the process behind writing a book. And feel free to get in touch. This is interactive on Facebook and YouTube, so send in any questions you've got. And if we've got time, we'll answer a couple of them at the end. And I'd obviously asked on social media for a couple of questions, and a few of you have got in touch with things you wanted me to talk about. There was one from a chap called Frank Telfer who asked, can you give us an insight into how you found the process of writing and releasing your first book? Yes, well, I suppose I've kind of done that to an extent already in that little speech that I just gave just now, but it's been absolutely incredible. The whole really satisfying, really gratifying, and if you'd said to me at this time last year, I'll have released a book that's sold X number of copies and is getting positive reviews, and it's about this particular subject matter, Hearts winning the Cup in 1998, which, as I said, was the greatest moment of my sort of young football following life before I got into journalism, I wouldn't have believed you. I mean, don't get me wrong, writing a book's something I've always wanted to do, something I always planned to do, but to be honest, had I got to the end of my life and never written a book, it wouldn't have been a great surprise, because it's one of those things that you would always tend to just put off for another day. So I think in that regard, the lockdown was a big help in terms of it was always something bubbling away, and it was something that I'd made inroads into. I'd contacted a few people about writing this particular book, but it was only really in the lockdown that I properly got my act together. Obviously, circumstances with work and obviously lockdown dictated that this was a good opportunity. And to be honest, obviously 2020 has been a disastrous year for so many people, and everybody's had their various different hardships. But I thought as soon as this thing hit, I felt a wee bit sorry for myself at first because of my work situation got turned upside down temporarily. And then I thought, right, what can I do here? The book was the only thing I thought at that time I'm going to have a lot of time on my hands potentially here, because chances are I'm not going to be doing a lot of work in the next few weeks or months. I need to make the most of it, otherwise I'll just stagnate or whatever. So that was really the sort of catalyst to kick on with this book in this year. So I look on that as a real positive, that I was able to, as much as 2020 has been a shocker for so many people, and I'm able to take the positives of I've written my first book and it seems to have gone down really well. So I'm really quite proud of that. the writing it was, I've said this several times on different podcasts and what have you, the process was, it was a roller coaster. It was ups and downs all the time. There was, you get the high of interviewing somebody and thinking, brilliant, that was a superb interview. And then suddenly you realise, actually, nobody's going to get to read that interview for 6, 7, 8 months down the line. And that's a bit hard to deal with, because suddenly you think, oh no, I've got to transcribe a 3-hour interview and nobody's going to get to read it for so many months. And it's very hard to get motivated in that regard, because you know your work's not necessarily going to get seen for a long time. Whereas as a newspaper journalist, you're generally writing a story today and people will be reading it, if not by midnight tonight, then tomorrow morning. So you get that instant sort of reaction to it, and then you move on to the next thing. Whereas here, it's very much small steps, baby steps to get to the point. And then as I got towards the finishing line, I really got a second wind. It was probably late summer, maybe August time, September time, where I was getting towards the end, and I really started to motor and accelerate, and I could feel a real momentum going, which I didn't maybe have earlier on. It was just one interview at a time back then, whereas I really started to motor and get a flow towards the end, and I could really feel the finishing line coming. And then after you finish it, it's not job done, because I don't know if any of you are aware, but I've basically self-published the book. I've done it all myself with the aid of a good friend of mine, Scott Cool, who was absolutely invaluable in terms of the production side. But in terms of the promoting the book and the getting it out there, and even liaising with the printer, I've done all that side of it myself. So there's been no rest, if you like. It's been constant in terms of trying to keep the momentum going, keep the snowball going, because I want it to snowball into the next year. It's not a book I want to just be for Christmas or be for this month or two and then it fizzles out. I'm hoping that Hearts supporters will just continue to want to buy it. I mean, obviously you can't read it twice, but I'm hoping there was anything between 80,000 and 150, 200,000 people in the street. So I'm hoping that anybody who was touched by that event will want to read this book and will get a lot from it. Because I think everybody who's read it so far has had positive things to say about it and how much it takes you back to the point. I mean, I've got a message here from a guy called Andy Carlin. I have only had time to read a quarter of the book. It is brilliant, laugh out loud, funny, brings back amazing memories. And I've had a lot of messages to that effect, and that means a lot, because you're always worried about, is your writing going to have the desired effect? And when you see somebody like Andy Carlin coming back and saying that, it just vindicates the sort of work you've put in. And I see G Care 1874 on Instagram there is saying it's genuinely a great read. It takes me back to 1998, which I'm sure was your intention. Very well done. I mean, that means a massive amount to me, that a guy who was in the Hearts End where I was is reading my book. And I mean, I know I'm blowing my own trumpet here, but if you can't do it after writing a book, when can you do it? So, I mean, that side of it is just, that's been massive. That means more to me than any sales I get, the positive feedback, the fact it's touched so many Hearts supporters first and foremost. And also, like, Stefan Adam got in touch straight away when he received it. I think he read half the book in about a day or two. And he was like really blown away by it. Billy Brown was loving it. Stephen Fulton got in touch to say it was a cracking read. So, I mean, that all means a massive amount to me when that sort of thing is... when you're getting that sort of feedback from people. So, sorry, I'm just going to stop 1 second because my Instagram story seems to... Is it back on? Is Instagram on? Give us a wave, guys. Are we still there? Right, the Instagram seems to have paused, but hopefully we're back in business, right? The Facebook and the YouTube are still going. So yeah, I mean, the whole process of firstly writing the book feels like an accomplishment. Then you've got the process of getting it out there and waiting for people to start telling you what they think of it. And that's, no matter what anybody says, that's a big part of writing a book. You want to get positive reviews. I think that's what we're all in it for. So that side of it's been hugely fulfilling, and it's made me want to write another book, which I'll discuss later on. But anyway, the main reason I'm here tonight is to give you a flavour of the book by reading a chapter from it. There are 26 chapters in the book. There's 130,000 words. And I was reluctant to do a reading because I thought I don't want to give it away. I don't want to spoil any bits for people who have bought the book. But I figure a lot of people have already bought it and read it. I want to give them something back. And if that's even just coming back to listen to this chapter again because they enjoyed it or they want to get themselves in cup final mode for next Sunday when Hearts play Celtic. I thought this was a good opportunity and a good time. Obviously, a Monday night, people have generally not got much on, especially in this period of lockdown. So I thought I'll give a little reading from the chapter about the build-up to the 1998 Cup Final. This is, I think, the 4th or 5th chapter in the book. So we've got a couple of chapters building up to how we got to this point. And then this chapter that I'm going to read is basically the week or two leading up to the Cup Final. Maybe it's predominantly the week leading up to the Cup Final in 1998, but also a little bit about the tail end of the league campaign. It's probably going to take about 20 to 25 minutes, so get yourself a cup of tea or a glass of wine or whatever, and just hopefully you enjoy. I've got my little bookmark here, which I don't know if you can see on the screen. It's got a quote from Gilles Rousset. It says, "By winning the 1998 Scottish Cup, we created something really special. We created a family. I genuinely feel like these guys are part of my family. I just love these guys, all of them." And that's Gilles Rousset, the goalkeeper, and he obviously wrote the foreword to the book, an absolute cracking guy, Gilles is, but I think that sentiment sort of underlines what I took away from the book, that this was an achievement by a group who were just so close-knit and had a special bond, and I hope that's reflected in the book. But yeah, so as I said, the chapter I'm going to read is called The Build-Up, and it's basically the period leading up to the Rangers game. So I've never done a reading from a book, so excuse me if I get the tone slightly wrong or whatever, but I'll give it my best shot anyway, and hopefully you can follow along. Okay, so shortly after Stephen Fulton had returned home from helping Hearts defeat Dunfermline Athletic 2-0 on the last day of the league campaign, his sister-in-law Ashley arrived at his house in Cumbernauld armed with her hairdressing kit. The midfielder's 3 young sons, Jay, Dale and Tyler, watched on with a mixture of intrigue and amusement as their aunt set about dyeing their father's hair peroxide blonde. This was to be Fulton's eye-catching new look for the following weekend's Scottish Cup Final. When he rocked up at Edinburgh Airport the next morning to meet the rest of the squad ahead of their pre-Cup Final trip to the Midlands, Fulton, as was so often the case, found himself getting ribbed by his teammates. "Me and Tosi Katongo had a wee agreement that we'd get our hair done if we got to the final, but he backed out of it," Fulton explains. "I don't know why I did it, because I'm not actually one who likes the limelight, and dyeing your hair blonde kind of goes against that." Katongo was also teased by the rest of the squad as he hadn't stuck to his side of the bargain. "I tried it and my hair turned ginger, so I had to dye it back," the Angolan laughs. Fulter's actually suited that hair. The relaxed, upbeat mood in the Hearts camp the weekend before the final was in stark contrast to that of their opponents. As the players boarded their Sunday morning flight to London Heathrow in good spirits, their Rangers counterparts, serial winners within Scottish football, were waking up to a realisation that after 9 successive years of league title glory, their dominance of the Scottish Premier Division was finally over. They had missed the opportunity to win a record 10th title in a row. While Hearts were beating Dunfermline in the Gorgie sunshine and rediscovering the verve and confidence that had eluded them for much of the previous month, Walter Smith's men were playing out a 2-1 victory over Dundee United at Tannadice, which was rendered meaningless by the fact Celtic were beating St Johnstone 2-0 at Parkhead to remain 2 points clear of the Ibrox side at the end of a remarkable league campaign. Of course, until just 4 weeks previously, Hearts had also been heavily involved in this battle for the championship before their challenge fizzled out after the gut-wrenching 2-1 defeat away to bottom-of-the-table Hibs on Saturday 11th of April. As everyone connected with the Tynecastle club could testify from their bitter memories of May 1986, if you're going to miss out on a league title, it's probably best that it doesn't happen on the last day of the season, the week before a cup final. If we'd gone on to lose the 98 final after the way we fell away in the league, I'd probably have been able to understand how Gary Mackay and Robbo felt after losing the league and the cup in 1986, Fulton acknowledges. But even though we'd fallen away in the league, I had no doubt in my mind that we could pick ourselves up for the cup final. We never got enough points against the Old Firm to finish ahead of them, but we had been close enough to them in most of our games. It wasn't like previous years when you'd look up at the scoreboard at Ibrox or Parkhead and see yourself 4-0 down. That Hearts team had something more about us, so there was no fear going into it. It was the third time we were playing that Rangers team in a cup final in 3 seasons. The first time we got pumped off them, the second time we were a lot closer, and so when it came to the third time, we were thinking, right, this is the time we're going to do it. There was a lot of pressure on Rangers as well. They had just lost the league and the team was all breaking up. I felt there were loads of factors in our favour. With the benefit of hindsight, it seems fair to surmise that it was something of a blessing in disguise for Hearts that their title bid was effectively ended with 4 league games still to play, allowing just over a month in which to dust themselves down and recover, both mentally and physically, ahead of the final. After losing at Easter Road and slipping 4 points behind both Rangers and Celtic with 4 games remaining, they were left with only one realistic prize to shoot for, and all their eggs duly went into the Scottish Cup basket. After we were out of the title race, we were able to put all our focus and energy on the cup final, says midfielder Thomas Flogel. As galling as it was at the time, Hearts effectively had 5 weeks before the defining match of their season in which to banish the deep disappointment of missing out on a title they felt for long periods of the campaign was within their grasp. The last 4 league matches were basically an exercise in trying to restore some spark and poise to a team which had lost its mojo around Easter time. Gary Naismith, Stefano Salvatore, Paul Ritchie, Flogel, Stefan Adam and Colin Cameron, who was battling a pelvic problem, all sat out at least one of the 4 season-closing fixtures, as players were given the opportunity to recharge batteries and refocus minds after the strain of a 3-way battle ultimately proved too much. When Hearts lost 3-0 at home to Rino Gattuso-inspired Rangers in their penultimate home match just 3 weeks before the final, it was hard to see how the hosts could take any positives from it. On the afternoon of Saturday 25th of April, after witnessing their beleaguered team lose 3 or more goals to their cup final opponents for the third time in 4 meetings, 13,000 demoralised Hearts fans filtered out of Tynecastle fearing the worst about their upcoming rematch with the Ibrox side. Crucially though, Jeffries and Billy Brown were able to use this setback, their last defeat of the season, to help them plot a path to glory. I remember vividly going to see Jim on the Thursday before the last league game against Dunfermline, so 9 days before the cup final, recalls football journalist Graham Spears, who was writing for the Scotland on Sunday newspaper at the time. I always got on well with Jim. He seemed to take a shine to me for some reason. I said to him, "Look, Jim, I need to come and see you to preview the final. Can I have half an hour with you by myself?" That was probably a bit selfish of me because he was doing loads of other media stuff to preview the final. It was at the end of the working day, possibly about 4:30 p.m. I arrived at the traditional pre-rebuilt Tynecastle main stand and he took me into his office. Jim was a bit cagey at first, but then he said something along the lines of, "I don't know if I should tell you this, but I've been speaking to Billy about it, and we've decided to do something totally different for this final." Hearts had been unable to get a result against Rangers in each of the games against them that season, so Jim and Billy were going to spend the next week in training working on a new idea and a new system. I remember sitting thinking, gosh, this is quite revealing stuff. And Jim joked at the end, "What the hell have I been telling you?" Although the main part of Jeffrey's work in the closing weeks of the league campaign revolved around trying to raise morale levels within his squad while pondering team selection and tactics for the final, there were plenty other things to be taken care of ahead of the big day. Most notably, how they were going to spend the week leading up to the final. The board of directors were brilliant for us in terms of the preparations, recalls Jeffries. We had our disagreements at times, but when it came to preparations for a game, I don't think they could have supported me any better. Preparation is huge. I remember when I was Kilmarnock manager and we lost 5-1 to Hibs in the 2007 League Cup final. I didn't think our preparations were as good as they should have been. Money was tight for Kilmarnock at that time and you can't do all these nice things for nothing. But the Hearts board in '98 never quibbled about a penny. They said to us, "We've got to get this right sometime, and we don't want to lose out through a lack of preparation." They gave us everything we required, and all they wanted in return was the Scottish Cup. We did it sensibly. We didn't go over the score, but we knew we'd left nothing to chance. On the recommendation of Scotland manager Craig Brown, Jeffries decided to take the squad to the Midlands, where they would spend the early part of Cup final week working on the new game plan, alluded to by Spears, at the impressively maintained training fields of the National Farmers Union Mutual Headquarters on the outskirts of Stratford-upon-Avon. The club duly booked for the squad to stay from Sunday to Tuesday at the Forest of Arden Hotel and Country Club. Sorry, my bookmark slipped there. The club duly booked for the squad to stay from Sunday to Tuesday at the Forest of Arden Hotel and Country Club near Birmingham, and then the Tuesday night at the Ettington Park Hotel in Stratford before their return flight to Edinburgh on Wednesday afternoon. A squad of 20 made the trip south. Gilles Rousset, Roddy Mackenzie, David Murray, Grant Murray, Dave McPherson, David Weir, Paul Ritchie, Alan McManus, Gary Naismith, Neil Poynton, Stefano Salvatore, Lee Makel, Stephen Fulton, Colin Cameron, Thomas Flogel, Jose Katongo, Neil McCann, John Robertson, Jim Hamilton and Stefan Adam. The one notable absentee from the travelling party was Captain Gary Locke, who stayed in Edinburgh for extensive treatment on a knee problem as he attempted to make a miracle late recovery in time to be involved in the final. Upon arrival at Forest of Arden, a salubrious golf resort and set within 10,000 acres of ancient woodland, on the Sunday afternoon, some of the players enjoyed a round of golf with Jeffries and his backroom staff at the complex, while others, including Weir, Fulton and Katongo, chose to watch the final day of English Premiership action on television. With Arsenal having already won the league, this was a day most notable for Everton fans invading the Goodison Park pitch after a 1-1 draw with Coventry City saw them avoid relegation at the expense of Bolton Wanderers. Having played a match the previous day, some of the players also visited the on-site spa and swimming pool to unwind. That evening, Jeffries and his backroom staff enjoyed a beer together in the hotel as they crystallised the instructions they were about to start imparting to their players the following morning. The manager had a strong idea by this point of what his starting 11 would be. He was already resigned to the likelihood that Locke, his first choice right back, would miss out, while he was hopeful that key duo McCann and Cameron would be fit enough to start despite their own injury issues. Regardless of which personnel would be available on the day, however, Jeffries was clear in his mind about exactly how he wanted to approach the game, and it involved a notable change of tact. We had generally played 4-3-3 most of the season, and got great credit for our attacking play as we ran Celtic and Rangers close, says Jeffries. But in our first meeting, when we got down south at the start of the week, we told them we'd be working on a different game plan. We read out the facts because for all the plaudits we had enjoyed that season, the best we did against Rangers was a draw at Ibrox, and we had lost 13 goals in the 4 league games against them. We'd been losing an average of 3 goals per game against them, and we told the players we couldn't afford to give them a 3-goal start this time. We'd always attacked Rangers, but they were a great team who had proved they could handle it and had the players to punish us, as they did on a few occasions. We thought if we let them come on to us, we could handle it, especially with the players they had available to them. The main threats for Rangers around that period had been Paul Gascoigne, Brian Laudrup and George Alberts. Gascoigne had left by that point, Laudrup was playing his last game before going to Chelsea, and Alberts was suspended after getting sent off in the last league game against Dundee United. This is still Jim Jeffries quoting. Alberts missing out was a big thing for me because he had been digging them out of a lot of difficult situations with free kicks and long-distance shots. The likes of Ian Ferguson, Stuart McCall and Rino Gattuso were great players, but they weren't necessarily players who would hurt you. We said, look, if we can keep it tight and make it hard for them, we could maybe hit them on the break rather than the other way about. We'd had enough praise that season for the way we had played, but I said to the players that I don't think anyone will care how we play in this game if we win this cup. From shackle-free 4-3-3, Hearts were preparing to go into their biggest match of the season, playing a functional safety-first 4-5-1 formation. The gaffer explained very early in the week which way he wanted us to play, so we were ready, says goalkeeper Rusey, who had full faith in Jeffrey's approach. I didn't really think too much about the change of tactics. I had so much respect for Jim and Billy that they could have asked me to play up front, and I'd have done that. I had no problem with us being more defensive. I just thought, OK, no problem, let's go for it. Jeffreys was keen to keep his players on their toes, so delayed naming the starting 11 until Wednesday, with the substitutes announced on the day of the game itself. The first man given confirmation of his involvement in the squad was 33-year-old club legend Robertson, who had fallen down the pecking order and was alert to the likelihood that this would be his last match as a Hearts player. Nobody knew what the team was, but I pulled Robbo aside at the start of the week and told him he was going to be a sub, says Jeffreys. Although he wasn't in the team, he was happy that he wasn't being left out of the squad altogether. Following friction with certain sections of the press throughout the season, and with Jeffreys keen to ensure a degree of privacy for his players, the Edinburgh Evening News was the only media outlet allowed to accompany Hearts to England, albeit Hazel Irvine of the BBC would be given access to training on the Tuesday. On the back page on Saturday 9th of May, the capital's local paper took great delight in proclaiming to its readers that the club have banned all newspapers, radio and television from their English headquarters, except the news, in capital letters with an exclamation mark after it. Martin Dempster had been the paper's Hearts correspondent since shortly before Jeffrey's appointment and had struck up a strong rapport with the manager and his players. It remains a source of pride to the journalist that he had earned the trust of Jeffreys enough to be granted exclusive, no-holds-barred access to the team on what would be such an historic week. That was such a special few days in my career, says Dempster. The training facility there was absolutely fantastic, and I was part of the whole thing that week, which was a real privilege. I think the only thing I didn't get to be part of was the meeting they had to discuss what the win bonus would be in the final, which was totally understandable. The fact they gave that sort of permission for me to be there, I think said a lot about the relationship that myself and the paper had with Hearts, and Jim and Billy in particular at that time. I was able to watch all the training sessions, have lunch with them, and I had a round of golf with Jim and some of his staff at Forest of Arden. I got great access to the players, and it was a fantastic thing to be part of. Dempster watched on with fascination as Jeffreys tried to instil a more defensive mindset into a team accustomed to playing free-flowing attacking football. They had played Rangers 4 times that year and lost 3 of them, says the journalist. Rangers had their number, so Jim and Billy knew they had come up with a system that gave them a chance to compete and beat Rangers. That was basically 4-5-1, and they worked really hard on it in those few days down in England. While the Hearts players were being put through their paces down south, away from the public glare, excitement levels were being ratcheted up among their supporters back in Edinburgh. The last of the club's 22,000 tickets were snapped up from the ticket office, while Jambos flocked in their numbers to the club shop to grab some merchandise for the big day. It was a crazy week, recalls Claire Cowan, a childhood Hearts fan from Broomhouse who had just become the club's retail manager a few months previously. The shop was going like a fair. People wanted anything they could get their hands on. Wigs, foam fingers, scarves, t-shirts, you name it. The shop stayed open later and there was just such a buzz about the place. It was brilliant, continued Cowan. Well aware that the club's struggles to win silverware had become a big talking point within Scottish football, the Hearts players were happy to be away from the hullabaloo as they focused on the task at hand. I think it was the right thing for us to go away in the week leading up to it rather than being up in Scotland for the whole week, says Fulton. Especially round about Edinburgh, you knew there was a sense of tension whenever Hearts were going to a semi-final or a final. I could detect it, and I hadn't been at the club for a particularly long time. Apart from Robbo, none of us had played through 1986 and all that, but it was still a stigma associated with the club. Although most of us weren't Hearts supporters, we had all developed an affinity with the club. Some of the guys had lost the two previous cup finals against Rangers, and most of us had lost the previous one. I was well aware of the reputation Hearts had of being the bridesmaids and things like that. I remember well the day Hearts lost the league in '86 because I was away with Scotland's schoolboys and Big Alan McLaren, who was a Hearts fan, was there. He was pretty much in tears. From then on, it was all about how Hearts would let their bottle crash. The only way you're getting rid of that reputation is by winning something. Striking the balance between keeping the players focused and relaxed was of huge importance to the managerial team. It was a big week for us, recalls assistant manager Brown. We went away to get away from all the furore back home with the papers all talking about Rangers and how many cups they've won and stuff like that. We wanted to go away somewhere, keep ourselves quiet and concentrate on preparing for the game. We prepared really well. There were certainly no drinking sessions that week, that's for sure. After a double training session on the Tuesday, the squad checked into Ettington Park, a peaceful 19th century country house with peacocks roaming perfectly manicured lawns, and the players enjoyed a laugh together as they attempted to play some croquet, with Robertson proclaiming himself the top performer. The jovial mood was added to when Katongo was ambushed by a group of teammates in the hotel grounds and stripped of his wacky all-in-one lycra running suit which he had been given by a sponsor. Fulton duly squeezed into the little Angolan's outfit and larked around on the grass, to the amusement of his colleagues. It was revenge for him not dyeing his hair, but wee Hosey's gear was a bit skin tight on me, recalls Fulton. I was left with just my pants on, laughs Katongo. It was so funny. Spirits were further raised later that evening when word reached the squad that Hearts' youth team, managed by Peter Houston, had won the BP Youth Cup for the first time in 5 years, after a side containing future first-team mainstays Scott Severin and Robbie Neilson defeated Dundee United 2-0 in the final at Tynecastle in front of a crowd of 3,470. I was at Tynecastle on my own, taking my youth team, and all the boys and the coaching staff in England were waiting for reports from the game, recalls Houston, who would otherwise have been in Stratford helping Jeffries and Brown prepare the first team. The phone call after the game to tell the boys in England the news that we'd won was great. The success of the club's youngsters was overshadowed somewhat, however, when it emerged that Chief Executive Chris Robinson had been accused of calling angry Hearts supporters parasites after they questioned him outside the stadium about why their season tickets weren't valid for free entry to the Youth Cup final. On the front page of Wednesday's Evening News, Robinson was pictured remonstrating with the three supporters above the headline, "I'm sorry for ticket row." The chief executive admitted calling those he had become embroiled with petty and pathetic, but strongly denied branding them parasites, even though the Evening News photographer backed up the supporters' claims that this was the word he had used. While Robinson battled in vain to calm this unwanted storm just a few days before his club's biggest game of the season, there were several nuggets of good news which helped nurture a generally positive vibe throughout the week for Hearts players and supporters. In a huge boost to the club, Ritchie, who was due to run out of contract in the summer and had been linked with Newcastle United and Aston Villa, put the finishing touches to a new 2-year deal down in Stratford, while his defensive sidekick Weir got confirmation on the Wednesday that he had been included in the Scotland squad for the World Cup in France the following month. This news was slightly soured for Hearts by the fact none of Cameron, Ritchie, McCann or Fulton, all of whom had been in the Scotland B squad and touted as potential contenders, made the cut. Salvatore, being interviewed by Dempster for the Evening News, was baffled by the squad announcement. "I'm delighted for David, but why have Steve Fulton, Neil McCann and Colin Cameron not been picked as well?" the Italian wondered. "Fulton, in particular, has had a fantastic season, and I can't believe he is not going to France. Yet Craig Brown has decided to take some players who have not even been playing for their club. That would never happen in Italy." Any disappointment for Cameron, Fulton, McCann and Ritchie over not making the Scotland squad was offset when Jeffries told the players what his cup final starting lineup would be on the Wednesday morning, before they left the Midlands to fly back to Edinburgh later that day. Rousset, McPherson, Weir, Ritchie, Naismith, Flogo, Salvatore, Fulton, Cameron, McCann and Adam were the 11 men who would be leading Hearts into battle. The team selection was difficult, recalls Jeffries. It was picked so we could play that 4-5-1 system, but also have enough legs to get at Rangers when we got on the ball. It was all about getting the right players in the right holes. Every manager in the world has put players in positions they're not totally comfortable playing, but every player in that final was comfortable in the position they were playing. The back four virtually picked itself. With Lockie out, Slim, Dave McPherson, was always going to play. Rangers had people like Richard Gough and Lorenzo Amoruso, so we needed that height for set plays and things like that. Davey was a good player with experience, and you need that in cup finals. We had a few youngsters in the team, and Davey had played in cup finals before, so he'd have been a difficult player to leave out. We had a few options at right back. Flogo could play there, and Grant Murray had played there, but with Davey being an ex-Rangers player, I knew nothing would faze him. The most difficult one was leaving Jim Hamilton out because he was a goal threat who was great in the air. I think most people probably expected us to play with our usual three of McCann, Hamilton and Adam, perhaps with Adam playing in off the right. That would have been a more attacking team, but rather than putting Adam and Hamilton together through the middle, we decided to put Adam through the middle on his own, where he could get in behind and run onto things, and Flogo out on the right. Thomas was a disciplined player, and we felt that would give us a good balance with him and Neil out wide and three midfield players. It was set up to effectively be a five-man midfield when we didn't have the ball. We didn't want to take away their attacking instincts, but we just wanted to play in a slightly more pragmatic way. The substitutes, although not named until the Saturday, would be strikers Robertson and Hamilton, along with Murray, the homegrown 22-year-old Hearts fan, who had made only 12 previous starts for his boyhood club. Grant could play as a defender or in midfield if somebody like Salvatore had got injured, Jeffries explains. He had come in late in the season and never let us down. He was a steady Eddie, a good competitor who was very disciplined and just got on with his job. People like Lee Makel, who was great for us, Wee Katongo, who had played in the earlier rounds, Alan McManus and Neil Poynton were all in the frame. I wish I could have stripped them all, but we only had 3 subs, so you try and pick players who can cover you in different positions, and Grant could do that. He was there if we needed him. Jeffries and his team were in buoyant mood by the time they arrived home on the Wednesday evening, following a hugely positive and productive stint in Shakespeare country. The spirit down in England had been fantastic, says Adam. There was no sense of pressure. I think that few days in England was when we really started to believe we were going to win the final. Jim and Billy spoke about the tactics and we worked really well. There was quality in the training, loads of goals being scored and everybody was having a laugh. You could feel there was a real confidence in the squad. It was a very important few days. My feeling when we travelled back to Edinburgh was that we were going to win that cup. Adam's recollection more than 2 decades on tallies with the vibe that was evident at the time. In his Evening News Cup final diary from England, Richie had written on the Tuesday that, I don't mind telling you that I already have a picture in my head of Steve Fulton with his bleach blonde hair going up to lift the Scottish Cup. This theme of Gorgie bullishness was continued the following day when Jeffries was quoted as saying he had a gut feeling about Saturday and was definitely detecting a genuine belief among the players. While respectful of the Rangers' threat, there was certainly no hint of Hearts being intimidated by their more illustrious opponents. We were all so confident, recalls Weir. Jim and Billy always made you believe you could win any game, particularly a big game or a one-off game. You always went in with the belief that you had the capabilities of winning. Rangers had just lost the league and were on a wee bit of a downer, so we felt we had a chance. There's no doubt about that. We were confident and excited. On the Thursday, the players had a light training session at Tynecastle before carrying out a series of interviews with various journalists on the pitch and in the stands as the team staged their official pre-cup final media day. On the eve of the match, Hearts received yet more positive news as Richie landed the Bells Premier Division Young Player of the Year award while Jeffries was named as Bell's Premier Division Manager of the Year. On the Friday afternoon, the Hearts squad, loaded with belief and overnight luggage, boarded the coach, driven, as always, by Alan Scooby Scott, and headed along the M9 to their pre-match base, the Dunblane Hydro. By the end of the week, Jim and Billy had done a great job preparing us for the final and had given us the belief that we could win it, said McPherson. Following a squad meal and the usual exchange of banter in the hotel lobby, the players retreated to their bedrooms, primed for glory. The rooming combinations, as had also been the case down in England earlier in the week, included Rousey with Adam, Weir with Fulton, Katongo with Mackenzie, Ritchie with Cameron, Flogo with Salvatore, Murray with Naismith, and Hamilton with McCann. Bonding together as a group and having that whole build-up to a cup final was pretty special for me because it was the first time I had experienced it for a Scottish Cup final, says McCann. It was the showpiece match at the end of the season. You're in it. You know everybody's going to be watching. The media attention is huge. You're playing a Rangers side at the end of an era. It had all the ingredients and it was just a huge game to look forward to. And that's the end of the chapter about the build-up to the Cup final in 1998. Thanks very much for listening to that, for those of you who followed it from start to finish, and I hope you all enjoyed that particular reading. I mean, I think the reason I chose that is pretty obvious in the sense that this is Cup final week, so there will be some similarities with regards to what the current Hearts squad will be going through over the coming days leading up to the Cup final against Celtic, but also, I suppose, to show the contrast of this is no ordinary Cup final. The Hearts players are not getting the chance, understandably, to go away. I believe they're just obviously staying at home this week, training at Oriam as normal. I'm not sure if they'll get a getaway even the night before the game. There they went to Dunblane in 1998, whereas here I think it's probably just going to be like any other game. So that'll be hard for Hearts in the sense that they're not getting all the... I know in the 2019 final, for example, they went away to St Andrews for a few days and they had a good time up there. But I think the words in that chapter highlight just how important these few days will be for Hearts with regard to their prospects of getting a result on Sunday. Obviously, the preparation work has to be bang on. The vibe has to be right. I think they're at a head start in that regard in the sense that they've won their last couple of games. I noticed on Saturday after they beat Queen of the South that this is actually the first time since 1998 that Hearts will go into a cup final on the back of a victory, which has surely got to help them in terms of their mindset. They failed to win any of the games immediately prior to their last four finals. So the fact they're going in on the back of victories should hopefully, from a Hearts perspective, offset any negativity that there might be about not getting to prepare for a final as normal in terms of going away somewhere for a few days and having the supporters all getting hyped up. I mean, the supporters are going to get hyped up on social media, but they're not going to be going into Tynecastle. They're not going to be in the stadium as they would be in a normal situation. So it's definitely going to be a very different experience for the Hearts players this week. But in some ways there are similarities because they're playing against an old firm team who have just won 9 league titles in a row. Obviously Celtic have done exactly what that Rangers team of 98 did. I suppose there are similarities as well in the sense that it feels like this Celtic team might be coming to the end of their run in the sense that Rangers could win the league. It's probably premature to suggest this is the end of an era for this Celtic team, but certainly in regard of going into a cup final against an old firm team who have won 9 league titles in a row and trying to end that dynasty, if you like, in some ways. There are similarities there. So I think it was the right time to... I think that was the right chapter to pick in this week. I could have picked... I mean, there's 26 chapters, as I said, but I just felt that was the right one to read in this moment. So on the back of that, I'll answer a couple of your questions. Let me just see what's coming on the Facebook and on the YouTube. Ian Durham, I think it'll be in my Christmas stocking. I've got nearly every book printed about Hearts. I think I've had quite a few messages saying they're hoping to get it at Christmas. And Wendy Glendinning has said definitely a book that will be read twice. Thanks very much for that, Wendy. I appreciate it. And have you thought of doing an Audible version? That's Wendy Glendinning again. It's not something I've thought about to this point, but it's certainly something I'll give consideration to. I've never, as I said, all my focus has been on getting the written version of it out. To be honest, I've not paid too much attention to that side of it, but certainly when things settle down in the next few weeks after Christmas, it will be something I'll look into and check, is there going to be a demand for it? Is it something we can do, perhaps incorporating one of the players? I don't know if that's a possibility or if that's something that would appeal to people, just to give them another way of taking the book in, if you like. Another couple of questions. Brian Chalmers says, I've just finished the book and found the Salvatore chapter particularly emotional. How hard was it to write? Wow. That was definitely the hardest part of the book. Obviously, Stefano Salvatore passed away 3 years ago, and obviously the only player in the team who's no longer with us. So that was a really, really tough one to do. It was a real test. And it was one, to be honest, I put it off probably till the end of the process because I had to get my head around the best way to deal with it, because it wasn't just something I could just take a few quotes from teammates and put out there as everything is gospel. I needed to make sure that the family were comfortable with it, because I didn't want anything that was going to come out and be in a bookworm that, I mean, there may have been, everybody's entitled to their own interpretation of events, but I didn't want anything there that was going to leave any inaccuracy that might have upset any family members or whatever further down the line. So I really wanted to get the family on board for this. And Gillian, Stefano's wife, was absolutely brilliant in that regard. She was so open and helpful, and I think she wanted to make sure that the chapter did Stefano justice as much as a chapter can do, to a man who was clearly well loved by teammates, supporters, and obviously his family. And it was obviously a tragic story. Like, until you dig down into it, you probably, I mean, obviously it's tragic when anybody passes away at such a young age, but like digging down into it, I found it really hard to do because it was raw. You're speaking to the person who's been bereaved. Stefano Salvatore was one of my favourite Hearts players of that team. I've got a photo with him when I was about probably 13, 14-year-old. I don't know what it was. I just really liked the guy. I rated him as a footballer. He wasn't everybody's poster boy. I realised like Neil McCann, Colin Cameron, Stefan Adam, and even John Robertson were the sort of poster boys of that team. But for me, Salvatore and Fulton were the two that I really liked. I mean, I liked them all. I have massive respect for all these guys as footballers, as a boy looking up to them. And as guys, from speaking to them over the past few months, they've all sort of vindicated that they're good guys in terms of the way they've gone about helping with the book. But yeah, the Stefano Salvatore chapter was a real challenge, and I had to spend a lot of time on it just to make sure I got it right and sort of did it justice and came up with something that reflected him as a person and as a footballer. And I'm hopeful that I've managed to do that. A lot of people have been in touch to say that they were crying when they were reading it. So as much as you don't want necessarily that to be the case, at least it was written in a way that people were able to engage with. So I'm quite happy with that. And the fact Gillian's happy with it, that's a massive sort of reassurance. What else do we have? George Banks asks, that says, are we going to see another victory over one of the Old Firm this weekend? It's certainly possible. I genuinely think Hearts have got a really good chance here. They're obviously underdogs. However, I would suggest that they probably have a far better chance of winning this one than they did last year when they played Celtic. I think the Celtic team of last year were stronger and in a better place mentally. And I think the Hearts team of last year were not as strong as the current Hearts team, both player for player and in terms of the mindset and the vibe under Robbie Neilson, winning every week. I think this is a stronger, better balanced Hearts team than what they had last year. And that Hearts team arguably should have won that cup last year if it wasn't for a couple of lapses in the last 20-odd minutes. They could have won that cup. So if Hearts get their game plan right, if they turn up, if Celtic are slightly off it, there's no reason Hearts can't win it. I mean, obviously it's a totally different scenario to 1998 in terms of there being no fans there, the time of year. I just find it really hard to believe that this is a Scottish Cup final we're gearing up for, but certainly if Hearts win it, it'll be a massive accomplishment, especially given that they've already beaten Rangers and Hibs en route to the final. So, they're not without a chance anyway. Whereas it would have been a surprise to many if they won last year. I don't think it would be a massive surprise if Hearts won it this year, but it will be a very hard game. Celtic are capable of turning it on. What was that last one? One more question. Who was the nightmare to interview in the sense that you couldn't keep your focus for laughing? I think that's quite an easy one. He wasn't a nightmare, he was brilliant to interview, but in terms of keeping focused and keeping things serious, it was definitely Jose Katongo. He was great and really good guy, and just such a funny guy as well. I can see why he was so popular in the dressing room. He's just a really genuine guy as well. I'd never really dealt with Jose before doing the book, but he was so helpful with everything. He was always on hand to help me out with different things if I needed to check information. And he always had an anecdote about people, and he just bursts out laughing when he speaks. He's brilliant. It's fantastic. Very hard to get any continuity going because he just bursts out laughing all the time with these little stories. But no, he was fascinating to listen to, and just a lovely guy as well. And he was the first guy that received the book, and he was really chuffed about that. So I'm mindful of the fact time's ticking, and you've probably heard enough of my voice for now. So one more question. Stephen Dykes, do you plan to do another book? Well, yes, I do. I've obviously explained on social media that there will be another book coming that I'm going to be kicking off in the new year. I'm still waiting to get the T's crossed and the I's dotted on that, but it's pretty much a formality. But I don't want to announce it just now. I was supposed to speak to somebody pretty important about it today, and that's had to be postponed until tomorrow. So I want to wait until that conversation's out the way, just to get everything absolutely nailed down before I make any proper announcements about that. But it's something I'm really, really excited about. It's for Hearts supporters again, and I think I'm hopeful that on the basis of what this one's done, I'm really hopeful that it's going to be a success and it's going to hit the mark with you guys. But that's for another week. We'll discuss that one another time. You can keep up to date on my social media. Anthony A. Brown on Twitter is probably the best way to follow. And in terms of the book, thank you so much to every single person who has bought the book, helped with producing the book. I mean, the players, the management, everybody who's contributed to it, everybody who's given me advice. Scott Cool, my unofficial editor, who was an absolute godsend, absolutely brilliant, and to all the people who have just supported the book on social media and what have you. It's just, as I said before, it's been massive. You have given me a real big push at difficult times, and it's made it such an experience that you guys have all been involved with it. And if there's people out there who haven't got the book and plan to get it, you can either pick it up in the Hearts shop, the club store, where they've been stocking them. I think we've restocked 4 times so far, so hopefully that's a sign of how well it's going, and hopefully that continues well into the new year. You can pick up a copy in the Hearts shop, or you can order directly from myself online at the following website, legends98.bigcartel.com. That's legends98.bigcartel.com, or just follow me on Twitter and you'll find the address there somewhere on my bio or on one of my tweets. I'm constantly pushing it. Apologies to all my regular Twitter followers who are fed up with all the spam promoting the book, but it's the only way I can get it out there in terms of the online side of it. So bear with me just now, just while I push it as much as I can. And thank you so much again to everybody who's supported it. I just want to finish by saying I hope you all enjoy the build up to this cup final. It's obviously going to be very different to a normal cup final. There won't be that same buzz of going to the game, but hopefully you all get a bit of a buzz at obviously this time where you can't go to the pub, or you might get a chance depending on what Nicola Sturgeon says this week. But hopefully it just gives you a wee boost before Christmas and all that, and something to look forward to, and hopefully there's some more celebrations and another great story to write about come this time next week. And most importantly, I hope everybody has a really happy and healthy Christmas with their loved ones. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you very much for all your support. Bye-bye.